How is it rocking, Dween Nation? Stay here because we are just about to get underway. In the meantime, please like, comment, and subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. We put out weekly sports content, and we want to continue to build up Dween Nation and the brand that is Dween Sports. Thank you all, and enjoy. Welcome in, Dween Nation. This is your host, Justin Pies, alongside Genoa Agudelo, and week 4 has been wild, fellas, and we're going to react, we're going to recap, we're going to analyze what week 4, what we saw, what it affects for the future. And yeah, so we're going to discuss all games of the week 4 slate. Before we do that, Genoa, how you doing?
Yo, Dween Nation. Justin, how's it going, my man? Justin, what a week 4 was, Justin. And now, bye weeks are on the way, and we have to kind of go through each game as fast as we can in the fantasy perspective, Justin, and see, some players are quite impressive, and we might look to start now. And for some players, Justin, that we might have to just let go there, Justin. We might have to be OUT there, out
Right.
on many players there. So, Justin, I'm ready to get down into it, and, it's good to see you, my man.
Yeah, man. It was a fun weekend we had. We were enemies for a few hours on Sunday, but now we're back, and we can be friends and brothers again. But anyway, moving to Thursday night, we had the Cowboys and the Giants. It was a field goal fest for most of the game. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb had a huge touchdown. Rico Dowdle had a touchdown as well. The only storylines I could really see out of it, you were happy if you started CeeDee or Ferguson. You were really happy with Dak at first, but it really slowed down. So he ended up having like kind of an underwhelming game. And Rico Dowdle, he got the reception touchdown, kind of is the clear RB1 there. I think that's kind of my takeaway thus far, especially through that game on Thursday. On the Giants side, Malik Neighbors leaves with a concussion. He is getting 10 days to recover, so hopefully he's back for your week 5 lineups. But if he is, he is the quickest start I've ever seen. 12 for 115. He is killing it this season. If you pick him up, if you picked him up, in your drafts, you have kind of the steal of the draft besides maybe Nico Collins. But yeah, Malik Neighbors has been phenomenal, and he will be in my lineup every week that he is active. But that's kind of the storylines from the game.
Justin, those LSU wide receivers, I'll tell you what, they all kind of went off this week. Jefferson, Jamar had a crazy touchdown run there in Carolina. Brian Thomas scored in Houston, and Malik Neighbors, what a week for these LSU wide receivers, man. And so, Malik Neighbors is now second in receiving yards there. And he is so much fun to watch, Justin. I am now on the Malik Neighbors bandwagon. Hopefully he's able to play next week. He makes the Giants so much fun to watch. It almost as if he makes that offense, Justin. If Malik Neighbors is not there, the Giants aren't a fun watch at all. I'm sorry, but I'm not watching, Daniel Jones throw to Wandale Robinson 45 times and not, go over 100 yards there. But, definitely, Justin, I want to, congratulate you and tell you that you were right. And tell you that you were right on Rico Dowdle there. I was a little kind of hesitant, but you know what, Justin? Rico Dowdle should be picked up in all fantasy leagues this week. I think he got a receiving touchdown. He's kind of dominating there, the snap shares. So definitely like Dotto there. I don't know if we start him there this upcoming week in Pittsburgh, but definitely like him as a stash. And Dak Prescott, hopefully he can feed Ferguson there. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb, still one of the top 5 fantasy wide receivers. You're starting him every week, no doubt. But yeah, this is quite the underwhelming game in fantasy. Although Daniel Jones performed better than I thought. But that's kind of the key takeaways from it.
Yeah. The Dowdle thing, I think you're right, is a stash because this week is a tough one. And the Ferguson thing that we have mentioned, he is a top 5 tight end rest of the season, like easily. I think he's going to provide that floor every single week. So I think that's good there. Moving to the game 2, we go into the Sunday slate. We had New Orleans lose to the Falcons on a game-winning field goal by Young Oku. This game was interesting. It was kind of a back and forth. We saw Kamara have a pretty solid game. He got a touchdown on the ground. And then we saw the running backs on the Falcon side was kind of the most interesting story. We saw Tyler Algier get very involved. I don't know if Bijan maybe grabbed up an injury at some point during the game where he was kind of being limited, but Algier was being involved a lot more. If we see this next week without kind of any sign of injury, I will be worried about Bijan moving forward. It's kind of giving me PTSD from last year. Because Algier is a good runner, but if getting Bijan as a top 5, top 10 pick, you don't want that kind of 60-40 split. You'd rather have 75-25 or something like that. With the pass catchers, we saw Olave, Shaheed, and Drake London all have good volume throughout the entire game. None of them get in the end zone, so it's not like a super big boom kind of game. But they all have good volume, and it makes me happy for their future value. Like Shaheed wasn't just getting 3 passes for 60 yards, 80 yards. He actually got eight catches for 83 yards. Pretty solid with 11 targets. Same with Olave, and then London had 12 targets, so he led the team by far. And then I think the very last storyline is Kyle Pitts, 0 catches, and I want to just say I'm OUT. I usually give players a week before I say that, but it's really tough in the streets for Kyle Pitts, and I'd seriously be considering, if he has a bad week next week, dropping him.
Yeah, Justin, there's a lot of tight ends that I would actually consider Kyle Pitts, guys like Hunter Henry, a guy like Kraft for the Packers, who had a pretty good outing. If there's Cole Kmet still out there, I mean, Justin, there are a ton of tight ends now that you can probably move forward and not have to look, that way. Even guys like, TJ Hawkinson's around the corner coming back. Maybe you can make a trade for a guy like TJ Hawkinson. He's going to provide great value for Sam Darnold and that Minnesota Vikings offense. Justin, I can go all day. There's a lot of tight ends. I mean, you can even start Likely. Justin, this is absolutely ridiculous. I feel bad for my brother JoJo, who has Kyle Pitts and left him goose. I mean, just unbelievable. That is just heartbreaking there. There's so many tight ends that you can now look into. I had this issue we're having PTSD exchange here. You're having it last year with Bijan. I had this last year with Kyle Pitts, and now vice versa here, Justin. I'm having this with Bijan. So this Falcons offense is a little. It's just not fantasy relevant there, Justin. Even like Drake London has been underperforming there, and Algier leading this team in carries. These two teams are just very disappointing, despite them kind of having a 2-2 record, them apart. And looking on the Saints side, Justin, a few weeks ago I mentioned this when they were 2-0, but Derek Carr is just going downhill now, Justin. He had a hot start to 24 in those 2 games, and it's just a typical Derek Carr thing. Justin, I would have loved the season to have Derek Carr in the MVP rankings. Obviously he had 239, no touchdowns and a pick. I mean, he was just not good at all. Olave there had a pretty decent fantasy day there. He had 10 targets for 8 catches, so not too bad. Rashid Shaheed, he's very touchdown dependent, despite him having 8 catches, 83 yards. Both offense are very underwhelming there. I guess the must start going forward each week is obviously Kamara, but I'm not really excited with either of these teams going forward.
Yeah, it's clear, as you mentioned, like Derek Carr, he's turning back into a pumpkin. It was kind of too good to be true, and so there's definitely some limits on him going forward. For the Falcons, I was expecting kind of more of a jump this week, and they kind of went plateau again, maybe even a little down. I know they put up 26. But yeah, it's tough. Hopefully next week they play on a short week, the Falcons do, against the Buccaneers. They do it at home though. So we'll see if they can pull out that victory and see if the offense kind of can click more in the future. Moving to the next game, we have the Bears beating the Rams in a somewhat ugly game. At least on the offensive sides. Obviously the Rams are all Kyren and that's it. You can't really own any other player. So the storyline of that is you have Kyren, you're starting him every week. Hopefully they don't burn him out or he gets hurt, because he is a small back. Moving to the Bears, I think the surprise storyline is Swift having a monster game. I don't foresee this happening much, rest of season. He did command the touches in the offense from the running backs. He had 63% of snaps compared to Roshan's 37. And then Khalil Herbert had 0. I think that's also a storyline. We thought maybe Herbert was becoming the goal line back because he had 2 touchdowns in 2 weeks. Completely not used, non-factor. And Roshan Johnson got the goal line touches. So if you watch our waiver show, or my brother here, Genoa, talks about Roshan and how, with the goal line touches he's been getting, or he got last week, And the fact that Swift is very unreliable, he did, obviously explode in a really plus matchup. I think Roshan is a guy to watch. And Swift, the only thing with Swift in the positive is they have a good schedule going forward. So maybe you can look at if he has another good game, you can sell him or something like that, because I don't foresee that being a long-term thing for Swift. And with the wide receivers, you know, it wasn't too big really for anybody on any side. Tutu Atwell was the leading guy for the Rams, which I think he is the best Rams receiver to pick up, even though they're very low tier guys. They're like even like a low flex wide receiver 4 at the moment. And then on the Bears side, DJ Moore gets a touchdown, but it's really underwhelming, only 3 for 22. And Swift's actually the guy that leads in receiving catches and yards. So this is all a Swift game, but if you can capitalize on Swift, moving him elsewhere, I would do so.
Justin, this was quite a confusing game for this Chicago offense. I kind of want to get more into this than LA. Swift led them in rushing and receiving there. Very interesting when you have Keenan Allen returning there. You know, Rome Odunze had a pretty big game last week in Indianapolis. Cole Kmet scored a touchdown, but none of these guys were quite looked at. You mentioned, yes, DJ Moore did score a touchdown, but only having 22 yards receiving there kind of scratches my head a little bit. And once again, Justin, we're consistent with this. We will be consistent all year. Matt Eberflus is just not that guy. Maybe he has a knick-knack for defense there a little bit with the Bears defense being kind of decent, but Justin, and now it makes me very hesitant to start any Bears. Like, even DJ Moore there, Justin. I mean, I'd rather start guys like maybe potentially, Brian Thomas Jr., maybe a guy like Xavier Worthy we're starting over now, and as well as George Pickens. And there's other receivers that you can kind of look towards the starting over DJ Moore. I know he scored a touchdown, but I mean, man, Justin, and also it's just no excuse for a guy you drafted in the first round at the wide receiver position, Rome Odunze, to only have 1 catch and 3 targets. That is just unbelievably ridiculous. The Rams defense are just not good when it comes to receivers, opposing offenses there. You know, they got shredded by Marvin in 1 quarter. You know, Juwan Jennings had 3 touchdowns against them last week. I mean, it's just very disappointing that this offense is just struggling. Caleb Williams has the potential to throw for 300 yards than Jaden Daniels does, and he's only throwing for 157. It's just very underwhelming for this Chicago offense. And yes, I talked about Roshan Johnson being a guy that you can pick up. He's kind of going up there in snaps. I don't think, Swift in this offense really works. Yes, he had 93 yards and a touchdown. I don't know if he can do this again. He's been struggling as well this year. And the Rams, I think they're just waiting for Puka and Cooper Kupp to come back for them to kind of really try. It seems that Tutu Atwell and Jordan Whittington, they're good, but not good enough to kind of help Stafford out. Obviously, you're going to start Kyron Williams week in and week out. He's a stud. But yeah, just kind of an underwhelming game there for fantasy perspective.
Yeah, I think the only last thing to talk about for the Rams wide receivers, Jordan Whittington did lead the team in snaps. So even over Tutu, Demarcus Robinson, Tyler Johnson. So, you never know. They play the Packers where I expect them to be down. And if you need a DFS play, maybe Jordan Whittington, who's going to be very cheap, is worth the pickup, as well as Tutu. Moving to the next game, we had the Vikings, who were up 28-0, and they do end up still winning 31-29 against the Packers. I was playing against Genoa here with Jordan Love, and I was so happy. I was giddy through, really almost 2 full quarters until that muff punt. I was like, man, Jordan Love threw 2 picks. Like, this is not like this is good for me. And then bam, Jordan Love hit a switch, and he was, that muff punt obviously changed a lot of things. And 4 touchdowns later, 389 yards later, Jordan Love's the quarterback 1 on the week. Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks had huge weeks in fantasy. The wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3 on the week. And obviously, I don't expect the Packers to ever be down like that, where they have to throw and throw and throw and throw. But Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, even Romeo Doubs are worth potential plays going forward. Obviously, Jaden Reed now to me is a must start, but Wicks and Doubs I think are really good, solid flex plays. Jordan Love obviously is now a must start every week now that he's back. And with for Jacobs, obviously he doesn't have a huge game, only 50 yards on the ground. I think it's a buy low opportunity for Josh Jacobs. This offense is going to start clicking where they can they're moving down the field every drive now instead of being very slow and not a lot of plays being run with Malik Willis. I think with Jordan Love, Josh Jacobs is in line to kind of get back to that week 1 and week 2 that he had this season. So to me, he's a great buy low candidate going forward. And on the Vikings side, they look great. I mean, everybody like Jordan Addison comes back. He has 2 touchdowns. I think Addison is worth a pickup if he's on your waiver wire. He probably isn't, but if he is, definitely worth a pickup. Because he's owned in 76% of leagues. So if he's available, scoop him up. If he's on your roster, he might be worth a start going forward. I think he's going to be great. Obviously, Jay Jettis is great. Aaron Jones got a bunch of touches this week. It wasn't like the best game in the world, but still a very solid game for Aaron Jones, who's going to be a start every week. And then Sam Darnold, he was, I believe he was Genoa's waiver pickup last week. If you picked him up, you were happy. And going forward, I would look to almost making him a start every week, a top 10, top 12 play every week at quarterback.
Yeah, Justin Sam Darnold, one of the surprises in this year's league. He is one of the a part of the last couple teams that are remaining there at 4-0. And Justin, we're forgetting that in a couple weeks he's going to be getting back T.J. Hawkinson, who was fantastic last year up until his injury there, Justin. So you have T.J. Hawkinson to go on with the best receiver in the league in Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, who's becoming one of the more phenomenal wide receiver twos there. It's if he's playing, Justin, if Jordan Addison is playing, he is a phenomenal start there. And I really love Naylor there as that wide receiver 3. So Sam Darnold has a good amount of people to kind of throw to there, Justin. And, I like Darnold to kind of be a guy that is, kind of starting in week and week out, potentially, he could be a potential play than Patrick Mahomes, who's struggling in the fantasy world, Justin. And you gotta, you can't forget that, this week he is playing his former team that drafted him. I think this game's going to be going down in London. But still, the opportunity for Sam Darnold to kind of get his revenge on a team that didn't really believe in him. They drafted him and kind of turned, their backs on him. So definitely like that. Looking at, this Packers offense, I do think that they are trending in the right direction there. They kind of are becoming a high-flying, high-scoring team. So I definitely like their receivers there. But they're tied in there. Tucker Kraft is a guy to definitely kind of look into, Justin. He's a deep sleeper there at the tight end position I mentioned. With Kyle Pitts struggling, this could be a guy that you can target there across the leagues there. And I like this Packers offense. And, these two teams will meet again sometime at the end of this year. So I definitely like these teams to definitely we see them come January time in the playoffs. And this is quite an interesting matchup there. But, pretty crazy that the Vikings were still able to hold on there.
Yeah, no, it was crazy to see the comeback. If you were a Packers fan, you were like riding high. You were like, "Hey, we're trying to pull a Georgia." I mean, it was kind of mirrored the Georgia Alabama game. Besides, like the late touchdown to take the lead part and everything like that, but the comeback from 28-0. So yeah, but if you have players on both teams, you should be happy that you have a player part of really great offenses. Moving to the next game, we had the Colts, who you were right. I mean, you said Anthony Richardson was going to have a bounce back game, but the Colts really had a bounce back game. And I mean, obviously Anthony Richardson left, injured, but Flacco came in and balled out. The only storyline with that is, so Anthony Richardson day to day, I expect him to be back this week. Which I'm never rooting for injury, but for fantasy, that kind of brings down all the excitement for me for those wide receivers, Pittman, Josh Downs, who saw huge games this week. That was really after Anthony Richardson left the game and Flacco was just dialing it up. So like I love Anthony Richardson. There's so much excitement going for him this year. But for fantasy purposes, for his surrounding players, to me, Flacco helps them more. Especially the wide receivers. So it depends. If Flacco does end up starting against Jacksonville, which is a really good matchup next week, I'm starting Pittman. I'm starting Josh Downs. But if it's Anthony Richardson, they're more cautious starts because of just how good the matchup is. And then on the ground, obviously, if you heard our waiver episode, Jonathan Taylor injured with a high ankle sprain. Trey Sermon is a must add off waivers. I think he's a plug and play this week against the Jaguars. And then on the Steelers side, George Pickens had a phenomenal game on 11 targets, had 113 yards. It was a really good matchup for George Pickens, and they were down, so they had to throw the ball a lot. So you were happy if you started him. I personally think that going forward, a lot of the Steelers games this season will be unlike what this one was and be more like what those first 3 games were, which makes me a little hesitant with George Pickens, just the fact
Mhm.
that, hey, games are going to be slower and not as plus of a matchup as the Steelers had this week. So I think maybe Pickens is a sell high candidate, and that's just me personally. But Justin Fields is a waiver pickup for me that we talked about. So who do they play next week? I feel like we looked that up. They play the Cowboys on Sunday night next
Cowboys.
week. So I expect that game to actually be a pretty good shootout. So if you're being like, hey, Pickens, I really liked him. Maybe wait one more week, see that big week against the Cowboys, and then sell. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, Justin, with this Steelers offense, it's very tough to kind of see where you're going to get offensively. Obviously, the running game hasn't really been exciting there. Cordell Patterson, I think, left the game early. Najee's been underwhelming. They don't really have kind of a running back that can thread the needle and move the chain. So it kind of requires for Fields to do more than he's asked there. So I'm not really sure what to expect. I have to really kind of have to watch next week's game to really learn more about Pittsburgh and their offense. Flipping over to the Colts side, Justin, it's kind of, some deja vu, kind of what happened last year with Cleveland and how Joe Flacco was able to kind of revitalize that offense. And, Justin, Joe Flacco is no doubt a Hall of Famer. He is a guy that, in Baltimore wasn't the biggest, yeah, he had some great moments where, he was able to throw the ball and sling it, but there was some times in the regular season where he wasn't that great of a fantasy quarterback. But Justin, it's crazy how he gets to these offense, led by Stefanski, now led by Shane Steichen. He is now able to sling the rock like no other. And if you think about it, Justin, this was how he was able to win the Super Bowl many, many years ago in 2013, where I think he went like 11 touchdowns and no picks, kind of hitting that 1,200-yard mark passing in those 4 playoff games and that run to that Super Bowl run. And that's kind of his motto there. In Baltimore, they were able to ground him and kind of limit him in his throwing. Maybe they didn't give him enough targets. They did give him some Steve Smith at the end of his career. And there was some times where he had some good playmakers, but just now he has these number one receivers in Amari Cooper and Njoku, and now he has Pittman who kind of breaks off there. And so it is. I kind of agree with you. As much as I love AR, he does hurt the stock of these pass catchers. I know he's battling an injury there. So it's very interesting to see. I believe that they should just rest AR a week and see what Flacco can do and kind of pull an upset victory in Jacksonville. But very interesting to see, though. If he does there, Justin, I definitely like Pittman as, kind of a must start this upcoming week.
Yeah, I agree. I would honestly like for the Colts to just test out Flacco, see what happens. Not saying, I mean, if Anthony Richardson's healthy, obviously he's going to play. And but yeah, I agree. Flacco kind of helps the fantasy stock for all Colts players. Moving to the next game this game was a pretty low light game, even though it was an upset. We had the Broncos go into MetLife, dreaded MetLife, and beat the Jets. Obviously, the Jets had a chance to win. They missed a field goal with Zerline, but it was raining. It was 50 yards out. It's tough, but it's funny that the Broncos were able to win a game where Bo Nix throws 60 total yards passing. Very rough. To me, the storylines out of this game, Pat Surtain is going to be a guy every week. If you have your receiver going against him, that you're going to be seriously worried. He locked up Garrett Wilson, and he's locked up everybody he's played against this year, which have been notable names. We think we mentioned it last week. Mike Evans, DK Metcalf, George Pickens, and now Garrett Wilson is added to the list. So if you're playing against the Broncos, if Devontae Adams plays next week against the Broncos, I'm worried about Devontae Adams. And now that goes for Jacoby Myers. If Jacoby Myers is the de facto one, if Adams misses, but with Garrett Wilson, again, it's just a kind of an underwhelming week. But he had a tough matchup, so I'm not like selling or OUT. He does need to have a good game next week for me to. I know he plays the Vikings, but hey, we saw the Packers do really well against them. And then with the oh my gosh, with the running backs, Braylon Allen and Brees Hall. Brees Hall is a very bad game. Um, the Broncos defense looks to be stepping up, so that's maybe part of it. But Braylon Allen is involved too much for me to be excited about Brees Hall rest of the season. Honestly, I think it's going to be like this all year to keep Brees Hall fresh towards a playoff, future playoff run maybe for the Jets. And Braylon Allen's a good running back, so Brees Hall, I am worried about. If he has a big game, I would look to sell him. But right now, you just can't because you can. People know about this usage in the splits. And then on the Broncos side, to me, the storyline Cortland Sutton looks somewhat good. He gets that toe tap touchdown. Maybe Bo Nix and him are working up some chemistry. And then Javonte Williams. It wasn't like the best game in the world, but hey, he got all the touches. Unfortunately, Tyler Bidet does get injured, but I heard he's good. He's stable. He can move all his extremities. It was a really sad scene to watch. But moving forward, I mean, hopefully he can come back soon. But with Javonte leading that backfield, I'm actually excited for next week. Personally, I think he will be somebody that you can think about playing in your flex position against a Raiders team that it's going to be close, just like it was against the Jets, except they can run more on the Raiders. And Javonte looked good, to be honest with you. I was watching that game. He actually looked good running the ball. So I think he might be an interesting play next week.
Yeah, Justin, potentially, with both teams, uh, with the Jets, excuse me, Garrett Wilson did have a fumble, and he's struggling a little bit. And so I guess I want to blame it on the weather. It was really muggy and kind of slightly raining there at MetLife. And Rodgers, he just couldn't move the ball, and they only scored 9 points. Looking into this, backfield situation, Braylon Allen is really talented, and the Jets kind of don't know what to do about it because yes, Brees Hall is also talented, but Braylon Allen brings a lot of running back one upside there. And I think the Jets now have themselves a little bit of a problem with having two talented running back ones. And so that gets very interesting to see how this season unfolds. I would look to trade Brees Hall uh, as soon as you can, man, because Braylon Allen's going to be kind of nudging into his touches. He had more, actually he didn't. He had 8 carries to Brees' 10, but he had more rushing yards. And Braylon Allen is, a guy that is they're also looking at there and their kind of receiving game. Brees Hall had 2 catches and Braylon had 1, so they're really not far off there. They're kind of splitting there in stats, so that is something to eye there big time. And definitely this week against Minnesota, which is a tough defense, it is very alarming. I almost want to put Brees Hall as a sit, even though he's a first round pick. He's definitely been picking the first 5, 6 picks this past year in the fantasy drafts, and so Denver not much to say as well. Happy Javonte Williams can get 16 carries for 77 yards, but this offense is very underwhelming, and so not much to say there. And definitely, these are two offenses that I'm staying away from. Maybe I'm starting Brees Hall and Garrett Wilson. That's really it out of both of these two offenses.
Yeah, I can kind of get behind that. You still got to start your stars. Moving to the last game in part one's coverage of the fantasy recap and reactions is the Buccaneers and the Eagles. And the Buccaneers dominated this game from the jump. I believe they were up 21-0 at one point. And to me, I don't put too much stock in it for Philly. Obviously, they didn't have A.J. Brown. They didn't have Devonta Smith. So they were already shorthanded. And so it was an ugly game for them. Jalen Hurts, again, has been very underwhelming this season. Saquon Barkley, he had a okay game. Didn't get in the end zone. But he got some yardage. But overall, I guess based on your projections of Saquon every week, it was an underwhelming game. So that's I kind of want to watch. I'll be watching this game out more for Philly as they go into the bye and hopefully have both wide receivers back for the rest of the season stretch starting week 6. And on the Buccaneers side, I'm glad they got back on it. They got back on track after a really ugly week against the Broncos. We saw Evans get in the end zone. Had a ton of 8 catches, 94 yards on 14 targets, so he was heavily involved. The running backs again are split right down the middle this time, but Bucky Irving gets the touchdown. Again, to me, it's to continue slowly, gradually, where Bucky and Rashad White are going to kind of become even. So that, again, if you can get out of the Rashad White sweepstakes, do so as fast as you can, with what you can. And then last thing, Baker Mayfield, 3 touchdowns, over 300 yards. What a great game for Baker Mayfield. I think he's been great just about all season, besides 1.5 games. So they do have a short week next week at Atlanta, which is, to me, kind of a so-so matchup. So I'm not super high on him next week, but he had a great game this week.
Yeah, Justin, looking at these two offenses, Dallas Goedert had, led this Eagles team in, catches and receiving yards. So he might be a tight end that, you're also looking to start over, if you have like a Kyle Pitts or Dallas Goedert. I think Dallas Goedert is no doubt a start. I know they have a bye week, I believe, next week.
Next week.
Oh, this week. And so, looking at this Buccaneers side, it's pretty crazy that, now that Dave Canales is gone, that there's kind of a new sheriff in town with running backs, and it's Bucky Irving. And he does get that touchdown, and Rashad White is becoming more of an afterthought there. Like, I was really a little bit excited for it just because of his receiving upside. So definitely look to trade Rashad right there. Obviously, Godwin, had a pretty decent game, but, we're not too worried about Godwin there. And this Buccaneers offense, they're going to be in these type of games where they're kind of on and off each week. They do go to Atlanta on a Thursday night to start off week 5. So definitely, I feel like, man, Atlanta's been kind of home all season outside that one game in Philadelphia that they won. But definitely the Buccaneers offense is going to be kind of high scoring. We're going to be scoring about 25 to 30 points there as long as all the starters are healthy. Philly, I'm not too worried about yet. They'll have the bye week upcoming soon. And then they'll get their, 2 playmakers at wide receiver. Barkley, he looks pretty good. He could have scored that touchdown, but he kind of stopped short there. But definitely these two offenses are going to be still good. I'm not worried about either of them, kind of looking for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think we're kind of aligned on that. The Bucks do get the upper hand, and they've been owning the Eagles, so hopefully the Eagles can stay away from them kind of down the line in the playoffs. But yeah, so that wraps up part 1 of the fantasy reactions of week 4. We also have a waivers episode out for you guys to listen to, and then we'll be getting on to the second part of reaction soon. And then before you know it, we'll have forecast, starts of the week, game picks coming up this week. It comes up fast. It's crazy to see. I mean, the weeks just go by, we're almost already on week 5, which is crazy to talk about. But yeah, so check this out to kind of see what last week was, if you weren't able to catch all the games, and what you need to know for next week. But yeah, Jano, send us out.
Yeah, Dween Nation, thanks you guys for watching. Hey, it was a pretty fun week 4. Stay tuned for we can finish our part 2 there. But we love you guys, and thanks for watching. And as always, peace.